The best power forward to ever put on a pair of sneakers is saying this. The man who personally constructed the Spurs dynasty. Tim Duncan, the big fundamental himself, has spoken. He has won 5 titles in that building, bled silver and black for 19 years, and knows every fissure in that franchise's foundation better than anybody alive. Furthermore, his remarks were not motivational. It wasn't a speech meant to inspire the young men. It wasn't something you would hang in a locker room on a poster. Tim Duncan gave a clear explanation of this Spurs team's strengths and weaknesses, as well as why, in the words of the greatest Spur in history, this series may already be slipping away. Now, before you leave this video, before you claim that he's just being negative or that every analyst is ignoring San Antonio, I need you to stick with me because by the time we finish this analysis, you will have a better understanding of the Spurs team than the majority of people do. And the first step is to comprehend just how Tim Duncan fits into the current situation in San Antonio. This isn't conjecture. High-tech content is not what this is. This is an in-depth look at a team at a turning point, a generational talent under scrutiny, and a playoff series that provides us with all the information we need to understand the Spurs' current situation and future. Now let's get started. Let's start by discussing Tim Dummy because it is impossible to comprehend his words without knowing what he stands for in this group. This isn't the guy who played for San Antonio, cashed his paychecks, and relocated to a beach. San Antonio is Tim Duncan. He is that franchise's DNA. Duncan was the cornerstone each and every time Greg Popovich assembled one of the greatest dynasties in the history of professional basketball. 5 titles, 15 All-Star selections, 2 MVP honors, and 3 Finals MVP honors. The sport's most successful and fundamentally disciplined athlete has ever been in his position. Tim Duncan's remarks regarding the Spurs are perceived as a diagnosis from the patient rather than as background noise. And in light of what he's been saying, this is what makes his present connection with the team so intriguing and important. Even in retirement, Duncan has maintained a very strong relationship with the Spurs organization. There is no estrangement in this relationship. This is not a former player who now speaks from a distance after having a falling out with management. Duncan actively participates in the team as an informal advisor. He watches games at a facility where he coaches young athletes. With the exception of perhaps a Larry Bird scenario in Indiana, no other retired player in this league has the respect of a front officer, and he has Popovich's ear, or at least he did prior to the coaching change. People pay attention when Duncan enters the Spurs building. Players focus. He is not a ghost of the past. He is a live, breathing example of what this franchise is meant to represent. Consider what that mentorship truly entails on a daily basis. Duncan is hands-on in a way that only someone who has genuinely mastered something can be. He is not sitting in a luxurious box, playing games on a tablet, and offering unoccupied space. Before the ball ever reaches the young bigs, he pulls them apart to discuss footwork, positioning, and assessing the defense. These are not the kinds of discussions that take place during film sessions with coaches. The best big man of his generation is effectively imparting decades of information to the upcoming generation of San Antonio basketball players in these direct, silent one-on-one encounters. And when you have access to that degree of wisdom, and yet find it difficult to act when it matters most, it provides you with essential information. It makes clear that preparation and knowing are 2 entirely distinct things. When the lights are at their brightest and the pressure is at its highest, you may know exactly what to do but not be prepared to do it. Duncan is pointing to that disparity. This series has revealed that gap. Therefore, Tim Duncan's remarks have a lot of weight, whether they are made directly in an interview, in casual conversations that are publicized, or in the kind of candid moments that people in basketball circles start talking about. They are significant because of the man's character, his closeness to the team, and the fact that he has never been known to speak carelessly. Skip Bayless is not Duncan. He's not going on TV to get people to click. Tim Duncan typically has a very clear and sincere explanation for what he says. He is too knowledgeable about the game to be written off because he has watched and won too much basketball. Furthermore, his current assessment of the Spurs team does not present a favorable image for San Antonio's prospects in this series. This is the essence of his message. The Spurs are not prepared. Not quite yet. Not because of this. Additionally, the court's evidence is beginning to support him. Let's now examine the current state of this series. Because the Spurs are currently in an uncomfortable predicament. By no means. San Antonio is currently in a position where a loss sends them home because they are behind in this series. Completely stop. The season is over after one more defeat. There is no longer any room for error. No cushion is present. We won't be receiving the safety net for the following game. From now on, every possession has the weight of a full season behind it. Any team would find it to be a harsh environment, but it is particularly harsh for a young team that is still figuring out what it's like to compete at the greatest level in the postseason. And in this case, that is the crucial term. Youthful. The Spurs are a young squad. Everyone is aware of it. All season long, everyone has been saying that. However, there is a big difference between being a young team in the regular season, when you can bounce back from a terrible night and return the following week with a new perspective, and being a young team in the playoffs, where every bad night could be your last. The regular season is a lengthy road with numerous exits. The Spurs players are still learning how to walk the tightrope without looking down, as this series has shown through the harsh and brutal lens of high-stakes basketball. They still haven't figured it out. And that inexperience manifests itself at the most crucial times when you're down in a series and facing elimination. Late clock scenarios, defensive lapses under duress, and maintaining composure in the face of a boisterous crowd and the highest possible stakes. Take a look at this series' fourth quarter figures. Take a look at how the Spurs have fared in the last 6 minutes of close games. In reality, playoff series are won and lost there. Not in the first half. Not throughout the portions of the game when everything is going smoothly. You discover a team's true nature in those closing minutes of intense grinding where every possession counts. And what the Spurs have demonstrated in those moments is a team that aspires to be great and has the means to do so in the future, but they are not yet very good at controlling the game when chaos breaks out, turnovers occur at the wrong moment, a defensive breakdown results in a momentum-swinging score, or a missed free throw when the margin is one possession. Teams that win postseason series and those that lose early are distinguished by these particulars. And too many of those details were currently working against San Antonio. The Spurs must respond and win when it matters most, something they haven't been able to do consistently throughout the series. They must play with the kind of controlled intensity that eliminates mental errors and rewards preparedness. For any team, that is difficult. It's one of the most difficult things in basketball for a young team still figuring out who they are in the postseason. Tim Duncan has experienced both sides of it, therefore he is aware of this. He has been a member of a team that has performed well in those situations, and he is currently observing from the inside to determine whether this group has what it takes. Furthermore, it doesn't seem like he has a lot of confidence based on what he has been saying. Let's now deal with the big issue. The Wembanyama discourse has been around this team like a thundercloud during the entire series. Because at some point, the story about Victor Wembanyama changed, not subtly, but loudly, violently, and sharply. Over the course of the series, the Wembier's overrated fan base has grown significantly louder. It's important to understand where this criticism is coming from, why it's gaining traction, and whether there's any real substance behind it or if this is just the internet acting like it always does. Let's start by being honest. One of the most unusual physical examples the NBA has ever seen is Victor Wembanyama. His height, wingspan, mobility, reflexes for blocking shots, and offensive ability at his age are truly unmatched in the league's history. There was more excitement surrounding him when he joined the NBA than there had been since LeBron James graduated from high school. The language employed by the scouts was unfamiliar to them. Former players were making comments about a potential that they had never made before. Not only was it anticipated that Wemby would be good, but it was also anticipated that he would be a legendary, generational player who would redefine what was feasible for a player of his size and position. And that's exactly where the overrated discussion starts. Not because Wembanyama is inherently not a bad player, but rather because the discrepancy between the performance we are witnessing in this playoff series and the ceiling that was anticipated for him has provided detractors with just the kind of ammunition they were hoping for. Additionally, Wembanyama has experienced high-pressure times during this series when it seemed like the game was moving more quickly than his decision-making could keep up. In several games, his offensive effectiveness has declined at precisely the wrong moments. Opponents have been able to strategically attack him during defense genuinely. You use physicality in the post to make him uncomfortable, and you dare to use role players who defeat you while focusing all of your defensive efforts on winners. That is a clever and practical tactic that has proven effective at pivotal points in this series. How quickly Wembanyama can adjust when opponents take away his comfort zones is the key challenge for him going ahead, not only in this game but throughout his career. What sets great players apart from legendary and excellent players from great ones is their ability to adapt. Duncan had it. Whether Wembanyama can locate it before this series concludes is the question. Who is the clear favorite to win this, then? Dancing around it serves no use, so let's have that discussion head-on. Over the course of several games, the opponent they are playing in the series has shown that they are currently the more complete basketball squad. Their advantage in experience is significant rather than insignificant. Their coaching staff has experienced similar circumstances in the past. Their key players are no longer as shaken by the pressure of the playoffs as a first- or second-year player who is still learning the language of postseason basketball because they have experienced the weight of the pressure and responded appropriately enough times. This series' preferred squad has a number of advantages that go beyond skill. First, the Spurs are unable to devote all of their defensive resources to stopping a single player due to their ability to score from many places and cause issues for the entire defense. They must spread their focus, and being spread thin is deadly when you're already playing on the edge of your defensive capabilities, as young teams invariably are. Second, they are recovering at crucial times. Rebounding in close playoff games is the kind of understated edge that decides series. This isn't a fancy basketball study. In elimination games, second chance points can mean the difference between a peaceful exit and a spectacular comeback. Third, and maybe the most overlooked aspect, their poise during league games. What does the other team do when games get tense in the fourth quarter? The Spurs go on a run and reduce the advantage to 3 or 4 points. The building's energy changes, and the fans begins to believe. They remain calm. They control what they do. They carry it out. They execute the proper pass. They made the correct shot. It's not a coincidence. That is the result of planning, expertise, and an organizational culture that has been developed over many years to deal with precisely these situations. And when Tim Duncan observes what is lacking in this young Spurs squad, it is precisely the kind of DNA he is referring to. Additionally, there is a fourth benefit, coaching correction speed, that is not sufficiently discussed. The team that makes superior halftime and game-to-game adjustments nearly always prevails throughout a postseason series. Even if you have all the talent in the world, you will suffer if your opponent has adjusted in between games to negate your greatest offensive move and your coaching staff hasn't figured out a counter. This series' favorite team has demonstrated the capacity to spot issues early on and find solutions before they become trends. That is coaching at the highest level. Even if the Spurs coaching staff is doing a great job with a youthful squad, there is a real experience gap on the sidelines, which manifests itself in these crucial circumstances. Nevertheless, and this must be stated unequivocally, the Spurs are not without apathy. They have a route. It is limited, it just needs to be executed well, and Victor Wembanyama must provide a performance that silences every single person who has questioned him during this series. However, it is real. 3 things must occur consistently and steadily for the Spurs to win. Since the game has already gained momentum that is not in San Antonio's favor by the second quarter, Wembanyama should start enforcing his will offensively from the first tip. He must establish early dominance from the jump ball so that the opponent must adapt to him instead of the other way around. Every shot he takes ought to appear to be a choice rather than a response. Second, the role players for the Spurs must shoot the ball confidently. Although it may seem straightforward, asking young players to participate in an elimination game is one of the most difficult psychological tasks. Your natural tendency is to hesitate to give up the open look in the virtual star if you've missed a few consecutive shots, the crowd has become quiet, or the game isn't going well. Additionally, the defense can collapse or be defeated by Yama when those open looks arms are taken, suffocating every move before it has a chance to grow. If the Spurs want to survive, their role players must shoot with conviction. Thirdly, the Spurs must weather the storm. In this game, there will be a run. The game will seem to be slipping away at a period when the opposition scores 8 or 10 points in a row. At some time, every playoff club goes on a run. Whether San Antonio can persevere through that hardship, make the necessary changes, and emerge still competitive is the question. During those runs, young teams fall apart. Teams with experience bend and recover. Even though the Spurs haven't had any experience in years, they must have it tonight. The opponent's formula is actually simpler than the Spurs to end this series. However, simple does not equate to simple. Limiting the damage that Bonema may do in transition and in the mid-range must be their main goal. When the game is played at a tempo that lets his length and skill set flourish, when he has time to read the defense, and when he catches the ball in space, he is most threatening. They can significantly lessen Wembanyama's effectiveness if they can force the game into a controlled half-court environment where every possession is a grind and there are bodies between him and the hoop. Additionally, they must keep pursuing the matchup that offers them the best opportunities. In the fourth quarter of a close game, if a Spurs reserve is defending their main scorer, that matchup should be actively pursued. Teams of championship caliber are quick to recognize and take use of personnel advantages. They don't wait for the mismatch to happen organically. They perform plays that are intended to produce it. That is a problem with organizational sophistication and coaching staff, and it is one area where the Spurs opponent has a clear advantage. Lastly, they must look after the ball. The SP